I stood in that hospital room 6 years ago, holding 2 empty blankets while my wife sobbed. The doctor said our twins didn't make it. I believed that lie until last Tuesday, and I found adoption papers in her drawer with her signature and a bank statement showing $200,000. She didn't just betray me. She sold our children. And if you think that's twisted, wait until you hear what I did when I found out. But before we get there, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. Hit that like button right now, because this story is about to shatter everything you think you know about trust. My name is Wesley Holt. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a civil engineer here in Portland. For 8 years, I was married to a woman named Joanna. On paper, we had everything. A nice house in the suburbs. Good jobs. Date nights every Friday. The kind of marriage your parents point to and say, "See? That's how it's done." We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or at least that's what I thought until the day our world came crashing down. 6 years ago, Joanna went into premature labor at 7 months. I remember that day like it's burned into my brain. We were having dinner when she grabbed my arm, her face going white, and said the baby was coming. Babies, plural. Twin girls. We'd known for months we were having twins. And I'd spent every weekend painting the nursery, building cribs, reading every parenting book I could get my hands on. I was terrified and excited and so damn ready to be a father. The hospital was chaos. Joanna was screaming, and they rushed her into the delivery room while I stood in that hallway like a useless statue. Nurses ran past me. Machines beeped. Someone kept telling me to sit down, but I couldn't. I just paced back and forth, praying to a God I wasn't even sure I believed in, begging him to keep my wife and daughters safe. And then the doctor came out. His face told me everything before his mouth did. He said there were complications. He said they did everything they could. He said both babies didn't make it. I don't remember much after that. Just Joanna's sobs echoing through the walls. Just the feeling of my knees hitting the floor. Just the nurse handing me 2 tiny blankets empty, weightless, and telling me how sorry she was. They asked if we wanted to see the bodies, and Joanna screamed no. She couldn't handle it. The doctor said it might be too traumatic anyway, that sometimes it's better to remember them as the dream we had instead of the reality we lost. So we didn't. We never saw our daughters. Not even once. The hospital said they'd handle the cremation. A week later, they gave us 2 small urns. We had a private memorial service with just family. I gave a eulogy for babies I never got to hold, never got to hear cry, never got to watch grow up. And Joanna just sat there, staring at nothing, tears streaming down her face. I thought we were grieving together. I thought we'd find a way through it, the way couples do when tragedy hits. But we didn't. Our marriage became a graveyard. We stopped touching. Stopped talking about anything that mattered. We just existed in the same house, like 2 ghosts haunting the life we used to have. Then last Tuesday happened. I was looking for our tax documents because it's that time of year, and I went into Joanna's home office. She's always been private about that space, but I figured tax stuff was tax stuff. I checked her filing cabinet, her desk drawers, and then I found one that was locked. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was frustration. Maybe it was 6 years of numbness finally cracking open. But I grabbed a letter opener and forced that drawer open. And that's when I found the papers that destroyed everything. I sat on the floor of her office for 3 hours just staring at those papers. Official adoption documents. 2 healthy baby girls, 7 pounds each, born alive and breathing. Joanna's signature right there at the bottom, clear as day. Under the words birth mother voluntarily relinquishing all parental rights. Stapled to the back was a bank transfer receipt, $200,000, paid by Blessed Beginnings LLC to Joanna's personal account. The date matched perfectly the same week she told me our daughters died. My wife didn't lose our babies. She sold them. And she let me grieve ghosts for 6 years while she spent blood money. I didn't sleep that night, didn't eat. I just sat in my car in a parking lot, trying to understand how a human being does something like that. How do you look into your husband's eyes while he's breaking down at a funeral for children who are alive somewhere, being raised by strangers? How do you accept his comfort while you're counting money in your head? I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive my car into a wall. But more than anything, I wanted answers. The next evening, I walked into our house and found Joanna in the kitchen, making dinner like it was any other Tuesday. She smiled at me. Actually smiled. Asked me how my day was. And something inside me just snapped. I pulled the adoption papers out of my jacket and laid them on the counter between us. Her smile died. The color drained from her face so fast, I thought she might pass out. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "Where did you find those?" "Does it matter?" My voice didn't even sound like mine. Tell me I'm reading this wrong. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. She didn't. She just stood there, frozen, until I slammed my hand on the counter and shouted, "Tell me the truth, Joanna." She flinched. Then something changed in her expression. The panic turned cold, calculated. She crossed her arms and said, "Fine. Yes, I gave them up for adoption." I wasn't ready to be a mother, Wesley. I felt trapped. The pregnancy was suffocating me, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't spend the rest of my life drowning in diapers and sleepless nights and losing myself completely. I couldn't breathe. "So you faked their deaths? You let me believe my children were dead?" "It was easier than the truth," she said, like she was talking about switching internet providers. "The doctor who delivered them was my cousin's husband. He helped me arrange everything. A private adoption to a couple who desperately wanted twins. They paid well, and I told you it was inheritance money from my aunt. You never questioned it. You were too busy grieving to notice anything. I was grieving because you made me think they were dead." I was shouting now, and I didn't care. "Where are they, Joanna? Where are my daughters?" "Our daughters," she corrected, and I wanted to throw something. "And I don't know. It was a closed adoption, legally sealed. They're not ours anymore, Wesley. They belong to people who can actually give them a good life." "A good life? You sold them for $200,000? What the hell did you even do with the money?" Her jaw tightened. "I started my wellness studio." "It didn't work out, your wellness studio." I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "You sold our children so you could burn through cash on scented candles and yoga mats. That business failed in 2 years, Joanna. Where's the rest of the money?" "That's none of your business anymore." Stepped closer. "You let me mourn dead children while you played entrepreneur with blood money. You're a monster." That's when she slapped me. Hard. My cheeks stung, but I didn't move. She was screaming now, saying I was being dramatic, that she saved those girls from a mediocre life with us, that the couple who adopted them are millionaires who can give them everything we couldn't. I looked at my wife's this stranger wearing Joanna's face and said quietly, "I'm going to find them, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did." She smiled. Cold. Cruel. "No, you won't. Because if you expose me, you expose yourself. You'll look just as guilty for not knowing. So sit down, shut up, and let it go." I walked out that night and never came back. I checked into a hotel that night with nothing but my wallet and the clothes on my back. I couldn't stand being in that house for another second, breathing the same air as her. Every memory of our marriage felt contaminated now. Every moment I thought we were grieving together was just her performance while I suffered. I sat on that hotel bed until 3 in the morning, staring at those adoption papers, and I made myself a promise. I was going to find my daughters. And Joanna was going to pay for every single lie. The next morning, I called Monroe Garrett, a lawyer I've known since college. We grab beers sometimes, talk about work and life, normal stuff. But when I laid out what Joanna did, Monroe went silent for a full minute. Then he said, "Wesley, this isn't just immoral. This is criminal, fraud, falsifying medical records, potentially illegal adoption. She could go to prison for this." I asked him if going to the police would help me find the girls. He hesitated, then told me the truth. If the adoption was sealed through proper legal channels, even corrupt ones, the courts might not break that seal just because I was wronged. The system protects adopted children's stability above everything else, even above fathers who didn't know their kids existed. That's when Monroe suggested I hire a private investigator before involving authorities. Someone who could find the paper trail, locate my daughters, and build a case so airtight that Joanna couldn't wriggle out of it. He gave me a name. Simone Taft. Former FBI agent turned private investigator who specialized in adoption fraud cases. I called her that afternoon, and by evening, she was sitting across from me in a coffee shop, listening to my story with the kind of focus that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't insane for trying this. Simone worked fast. Within a week, she'd tracked down Blessed Beginnings LLC, the agency that handled the adoption. The company shut down 3 years ago after multiple complaints and a federal investigation. The owner, Dr. Patricia Voss, was currently under probe for running an illegal adoption ring that exploited desperate birth mothers and lied to adoptive parents. Simone said Joanna wasn't the only woman who'd faked deaths or abandonment to hand over babies for cash. It was a whole operation. And my daughters were just 2 more transactions in a long, dirty ledger. But here's where Simone earned every dollar I paid her. She found the medical records that Joanna's cousin, the doctor who faked the stillbirth, had illegally accessed to facilitate the adoption. Through those records, she traced the adoptive parents' names: Richard and Vanessa Pruitt. Tech executives living in Seattle, wealthy, no criminal history. On paper, they looked like decent people who'd gone through what they thought was a legitimate private adoption. I asked Simone what I should do next, and she told me to make contact carefully. These people had raised my daughters for 6 years. If I came in swinging with accusations, they'd lawyer up and disappear. So I created a fake LinkedIn profile, posed as someone doing genetic medical outreach for a research study, and reached out to Richard Pruitt. He responded within 2 days, said he and his wife would be happy to meet for coffee to discuss their daughter's medical history. He even suggested a place in downtown Seattle. The drive up there was the longest 3 hours of my life. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I kept thinking about what I'd say, how I'd react, whether I'd be able to keep it together. And then I got to Seattle, parked across the street from the coffee shop, and I saw them. 2 little girls with dark curly hair holding hands as they walked with a woman who had to be Vanessa. They were laughing about something. One of them had my dimples. The other had my late mother's red hair. 6 years old, alive, beautiful, completely unaware that they're biological. Father was watching them from 50 feet away with tears streaming down his face. I sat in that car for 20 minutes, just watching my daughters exist. Then I wiped my face, got out, and walked into that coffee shop to blow their world apart. Richard and Vanessa Pruitt were exactly what I expected. Polished, kind, the type of people who probably volunteer at food banks and remember everyone's birthday. Richard stood up when I walked in, shook my hand firmly, and Vanessa offered me one of those warm smiles that immediately makes you feel welcome. They had no idea they were sitting down with the biological father of their daughters. They thought I was just some researcher asking about family medical history. And for about 10 minutes, I played along. Asked generic questions. Took notes. Watched them talk about Harper and Sloan with the kind of love that made my chest ache. Then I couldn't do it anymore. I put my pen down, looked Richard straight in the eye, said, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to change everything. My name is Wesley Holt. 6 years ago, my wife gave birth to twin girls. She told me they died during delivery. Last week, I found out she lied. She sold them through an illegal adoption agency. And I believe Harper and Sloan are my daughters." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's face went pale. Richard's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. Then he said, very quietly, "That's impossible. We were told their mother was a widow, that you died in a car accident 2 months before they were born, that she couldn't raise them alone because she was grieving and financially unstable." My stomach dropped. "She told you I was dead?" Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "The agency showed us death certificates, hospital records. We paid $200,000 because we thought we were helping a young widow in an impossible situation. We thought it was legal. We thought it was legitimate." Her voice cracked. "Are you telling me we've been lied to for 6 years?" I pulled out the adoption papers, the bank statements, everything Simone had found. I watched Richard's hands shake as he read through them. Watched Vanessa cover her mouth, tears spilling over. These weren't bad people. They were victims too. Just different victims of the same woman's greed and manipulation. And somehow, that made it worse. Because now I had to decide whether to destroy the only stable family my daughters had ever known. But Richard made the decision for me. He looked up from the papers and said, "We need to go to the authorities. All of us, together." Vanessa nodded, wiping her eyes. Those girls deserve to know the truth. And whoever did this to all of us needs to be held accountable. So that's exactly what we did. I contacted the FBI agent handling the Dr. Patricia Voss case and handed over everything. The forged death certificates, the falsified hospital records, the money trail connecting Joanna to Blessed Beginnings LLC. The Pruitts corroborated everything from their side. It's provided their own documentation showing how they'd been deceived. Within 48 hours, the FBI had enough for arrest warrants. They raided Joanna's apartment on a Thursday morning. I was there. Not because I had to be, but because I needed to see her face when everything she'd built on lies came crashing down. She answered the door in her bathrobe, coffee in hand, and the moment she saw the agents behind me, she knew. Her coffee cup hit the floor. She looked at me with something between rage and terror and screamed, "You ruined everything." They were happy. Those girls were thriving, and you're doing this out of spite? I stepped forward, and an agent had to put a hand on my shoulder to keep me back. "I'm doing this because you sold human beings, Joanna. Our daughters. You let me mourn dead children while you spent their price on a failed business and whatever else you wasted it on. This isn't spite. This is justice." She lunged at me then, and 2 agents grabbed her. She was crying now, makeup running down her face, shouting that she'd been living in fear for years, that the guilt had been eating her alive, that her anxiety and nightmares were punishment enough. "I've been in therapy," she sobbed. "I'm on medication. I can't sleep without seeing their faces." I looked at her, looked at her hand, felt absolutely nothing. "Good," I said. "Now you get to see them from prison." They handcuffed her right there in her doorway while neighbors watched from their windows. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. Joanna was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, child trafficking, and falsifying medical records. The prosecutors didn't hold back. They brought in other victims from Dr. Patricia Voss's adoption ring, other families who'd been torn apart by lies and greed. The evidence was overwhelming. Joanna's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, postpartum depression, anything to reduce her sentence. But the judge wasn't buying it. 8 years in federal prison, full restitution to the Pruitts for the money they'd paid under false pretenses, and a permanent record that would follow her for the rest of her life. Dr. Voss, the agency owner, got 20 years. Joanna's cousin, who'd falsified the hospital records, lost his medical license and faced 15 years of his own. The whole corrupt system they'd built collapsed like a house of cards, and I watched it all happen from the gallery, feeling something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Not happiness exactly, but closure. The kind that comes when the truth finally sees daylight. But here's the thing nobody tells you about winning. Sometimes victory is complicated. Because while Joanna was being sentenced, I was facing my own impossible situation. The court acknowledged that my parental rights had been violated, that I'd been defrauded, that I deserved to know my daughters. But Harper and Sloan had lived with the Pruitts their entire conscious lives. They had no memory of anyone else. Child psychologists testified that ripping them away from the only parents they'd ever known would cause severe, potentially permanent trauma. So the judge made a decision that felt like Solomon cutting the baby in half. The Pruitts would retain full custody, but I would be granted visitation rights and gradual integration into the girls' lives. Supervised at first, then increasing over time based on how the girls adjusted. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was more than I had a week ago. And the Pruitts, God bless them, could have fought it. They could have made my life hell. Instead, Vanessa called me the day after the ruling and said, "We want to do this right. For the girls. They deserve to know their biological father." So that's how I met my daughters. Really met them. Richard and Vanessa sat Harper and Sloan down and explained. In terms 6-year-olds could understand that I was their birth father, that their birth mother had made some very bad choices, that they had 2 families now who loved them. Harper cried. Sloane just stared at me with these big, suspicious eyes and asked why I'd never come to see them before. And I had to explain, as gently as I could, that I didn't know they existed, that I thought they'd gone to heaven. The first few months were awkward. Monthly visits that felt stilted and strange. Video calls where I didn't know what to say. Birthday presents that felt like bribes. But slowly, something shifted. Harper started asking me questions about what I did for work, about engineering and building things. Sloane invited me to her soccer game. I showed up with a sign that said, "Go Sloane." And she actually smiled when she saw it. Then I went to Harper's ballet recital, and she waved at me from the stage. 6 months in, we were at a park, and Sloane fell off the monkey bars. She scraped her knee pretty bad, and before Vanessa could get to her, Sloane ran to me. Just instinct. She wrapped her arms around my neck and cried into my shoulder while I held her and told her she was okay. And in that moment, something broke open in my chest. Because that little girl didn't know she was supposed to think of me as a stranger. She just knew I was someone safe. Last week, we were having pizza at the Pruitt's house because, yeah, we do that now. This weird blended family situation that somehow works, and Harper was telling a story about school. She turned to me and said, "Right, Dad?" Then she froze, eyes going wide, like she'd just said something wrong. Everyone went quiet, and I just smiled at her and said, "Right, sweetheart."